Are you someone who is in the dating scene and maybe you feel like the dating world is dead? Or maybe you've become exhausted and you're just done with dating? Or maybe you are becoming a little desperate in dating? Tonight, we're going to look at a question: is modern dating broken? Specifically, we're going to talk about churches. Are churches failing young single adults? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome. I'm Adam, and this is Adam Answers. Not because I know everything, but because I love wrestling with interesting questions. If you were with us last week, we wrestled with the question: which burger is best? We compared two burger chains and then kind of compared all burger chains together. Today is February 27th. Happy end of February. That's kind of wild that February is over already, and we are already diving into March. It makes me happy because it means that the winter is coming to an end. But it just also means that time is flying by. Wow. This is the 31st episode of Adam Answers. Thank you for all those that joined us last week for our 30th episode. That was super exciting. We had my good friend John on as a guest, as our first guest on an episode. Loved it. Tonight, we're going to look at a question about dating. Now, I think we've talked about dating before. We've talked about it, I think, kind of in a broader context, but today we're going to talk about it kind of in a more specific context. So we're going to talk about the question: is modern dating broken? But more specifically, we're going to dive into the question: are churches failing young singles? But before we dive in, I just want to make two quick points. One, if you look over here at this QR code, it'll say ask a question. You can scan that QR code and ask any question that you want. And not only can you ask a question, but you can also indicate whether or not you'd like to be a guest on the show. Anyone can be a guest. Even if I've never met you at all, ever, you're welcome to be a guest. I love to have you on the show. Love to talk about the questions that you're wrestling with in your life right now. I'd love to help wrestle them with you. Um, and the link for this QR code will also be in the description. So if you're listening to this on maybe one of the podcast platforms, if you go to the description, there will also be a link that you can access that form from as well, if you don't have the QR code. So tonight we're going to talk about dating a little bit more specifically, church dating, because that's the world that I've come from. It's the world that I more or less lived in for quite a while before I eventually got married. But we're going to ask the question: are churches failing young singles? Are churches failing young singles? And I think when we ask that question, I think what we mean is ministries. Okay, most churches, right? I mean, not all churches, obviously, but almost every church I've ever been to has some form of young adult ministry. And the age range can be anything from 18 to 29 or 30. Who knows what it is now? But there's some sort of young adult ministry. Our question is: are those ministries failing young adults? We're going to start off by looking at some data. And I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it's eye opening data. It's interesting data for sure, but it's just data that's going to help us see why this question is kind of important. And then we're going to look briefly at just five different reasons for why dating might be difficult, especially if you're a young Christian single. So one of the first things I wanted to point out, I'm actually going to share my screen, which is not something I do often, but we have a article here it was a study actually that was published last year. You can see it was published December 2nd. It's called the New Barna Data: Young Adults Lead a Resurgence in Church Attendance. Now, this might not be big news to a lot of people. You might be thinking to yourself, okay, wow, okay, I've definitely been feeling that for a while, but it's um, that young people have started actually going back to church more, which is really great. But there's actually data to show that. For the first time in decades, younger adults, Gen Z and millennials, are now the most regular churchgoers, Gen Z and millennials. They're outpacing older generations who once formed the backbone of church attendance. So we can see here the chart. Actually, we can see these numbers aren't wildly different, but they're different enough to be significant. And this is the number of weekends US churchgoers attend church per month, 2025. 1.9 among Gen Z, 1.8 among millennials. For me, that number is 4, but 1.9, 1.8, which isn't a significant difference from 1.4, but it is a big enough difference because this is not what the charts looked like for decades, honestly. The shift signals a new opportunity for ministry. Younger adults are showing spiritual curiosity and a desire for belonging. Um, but even as they attend more often than older adults, they still attend less than half the time. So every touch point matters. Weekly rhythms can no longer be assumed. Church leaders will need to reimagine discipleship pathways. That includes ministries like a young adults ministry. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. I think this was actually a different part of that same study. This was released in October. New research on church attendance shows that decline of women or the rise of men. Now, this was interesting to me. Men are significantly outpacing women in church attendance since the pandemic, reversing a long-standing trend. Now, when it says long-standing, I don't remember specifically where I read it, but when it says long-standing, it means that this is the first time that they have ever been tracking data that this has occurred. And that's like since maybe the early 2000s or the late 90s. A long-standing trend in Barna's decades of research tracking, the 2025 gender gap is the largest ever recorded so far. 43% of men indicate regular church attendance compared to 36% of women. It also shows that among parents of kids under 18, married dads have the highest rate of showing up to church compared to all other parents. Only 1 in 4, so that's 24% of single moms attend church weekly. Why it matters. These shifts reveal how patterns of participation and disengagement among key groups that may reshape the fabric of church life in years to come. And we can see a chart here, the 25-year reversal. We can see in 2000, it was 47% for women and 38% for men. And those roles have almost completely reversed since the pandemic. Now, what I looked for quite a while is why. That's what I wanted to know. Why? What's driving this shift? What's driving this change? Why are men flocking to church significantly more than women? Because it's not necessarily the case that women are leaving church. I'd say it's just looking at the data. It looks like it's more the case that women are just not going to church at the rate that men are, in the sense that like the number of women increasing isn't increasing at the same rate as men. It's just kind of average. And the question of why doesn't really show up. And that's kind of one of the things they talk about in the study is we don't know why, because really this is just the raw data of like, this is just what we discovered, and figuring out why is kind of another study in and of itself. So maybe down the road, there'll be another study that comes out. But my initial thoughts on this probably have a lot to do with just cultural shifts and cultural conflicts. Honestly, there's a lot of polemics in our culture, especially since COVID. There's a lot of cultural conversations, cultural arguments, and there is a lot of antithetical worldviews and ideologies that have clashed and clashed and clashed and clashed over the past 6, 7 years. Clashing so much that sounds like a thunderstorm. And it can be confusing to a lot of people, especially to young men who are trying to figure out where they belong in society, where they belong in a culture. Let me stop sharing the screen here real quick. And so as I'm thinking about this data, I'm thinking, wow, okay, so we have young people who are flocking to church. That's really great. That's a good thing. And we have men who are like exponentially starting to flock to church more than women are. That tells us something about the state of our culture. That tells us something about the state of what we're telling these young men, what these young men are desperate for, what these young men yearn for and want to seek, as well as the young women who are starting to come to church more than Gen X and more than boomers now. And so when we talk about dating, I would say that there's 5 things that came to mind for me that we can look at as maybe not broken, but maybe we should think about these more as these trends continue. Because if there's a trend of young people starting to flock to church a lot more than the older generations, and this is a shift in dynamics that we haven't seen in many, many years, then we need to look at our ministries as churches. I mean, I'm saying as church. I'm not a church, but I'm saying we are part of the church. But we need to look at our ministries and evaluate: are we speaking to the needs that drove these men desperately to churches in the first place, right? Because if men are starting to come to church exponentially more than women, there's a reason why, and we need to be speaking into that reason. One of the first, I guess, reasons why dating, especially within the church, might feel broken or might feel like we need to reevaluate how we structure it is I would call this the commodification of connection. Modern technology has almost trained us in a sense to just approach dating the same way that we kind of approach shopping at Walmart or shopping at Amazon. We have this hyper specific checklist, right? You go to Amazon and you select the filters. Let's say I'm looking for a laptop. I type a laptop in Amazon. Well, on the left side, it's just a bunch of filters. What brand of laptop? What kind of processor do you want? What kind of graphics card? How much RAM do you want? What color of laptop? There's so many different filter choices. And dating apps have fundamentally rewired the way that we expect our search results to provide. Like the way that we view potential partners, we view them as commodities that are filtered, swiped, and optimized. So when I'm searching for a product on Amazon, I can also search for, specific profiles on pick your flavor of dating app, and that's not for all people. I'd say not for all people, but for many people, that's kind of rewired the way that we build expectations. So we have higher expectations about what kind of person we're going to end up with, what kind of person we're going to date. We actually talked about this, or actually, I talked about this in my video on decision making. Why decision making is so hard. I think it's the latest video still on the YouTube channel, and I talk about Barry Schwartz's work on analysis paralysis, and what he talks about is when people are given lots of choices, they feel a sense of freedom because I'm free to pick from not just 2 flavors of ice cream, but now I'm free to pick from 36 flavors of ice cream. That's awesome because I might be able to find exactly the ice cream that I want, like pistachio. But when we have too many options, like when there's maybe 250 flavors of ice cream and there's 60 flavors of pistachio, our sense of like satisfaction goes down and like exponentially decreases because even though we have like seemingly infinite more number of choices, that increases our expectation that we'll find exactly what we're looking for. So when we only have 3 choices, we're going to pick the choice that seems closest to what we want. Do you want a blue car, a red car, or a white car? Okay, well, there's not many choices. I'll pick a white car. And we feel like, okay, maybe I would have wanted a lime green car, but I'm okay with a white car. And you're fine with it because you realize that you didn't have that choice to make. But when you have a choice of 250 different flavors of ice cream or different colors of car, you realize that you're putting more pressure on yourself to make the best decision possible. So if you don't find that specific hex code of color of lime green car among the 250 colors that are offered, and you accidentally pick the one that looks more like sage green, you're going to be disappointed. You're going to be unsatisfied with your choice because you feel like, oh, there was probably a better choice out there somewhere, but there's just so many options that you can't possibly evaluate them all. And that's what I mean by the commodification of connection, that we've created this landscape of just unlimited possibilities that just beyond this swipe, maybe there's something better than the last one. what's the idiom? The green is grass, or the green is grass, or what's the idiom? The grass is greener on the other side. That's what it is. And we have this because it feels like there is just an unlimited number of options. There's an unlimited number of profiles that you can connect with. We subconsciously and unknowingly put this expectation on ourselves that we have to find the perfect one then. And if you find one that's like, okay, this seems nice, go get some coffee. She likes all the things that I'm interested in. And, like she wants to start a homestead, right? Like, cool. But then your mind's like, okay, yeah, but like, I don't like this about her. I don't like that about her. Why does it do that? Because your mind knows that maybe there's something better on another, just across the next swipe. And the church isn't immune to this. Instead of filtering just for height or income, we often add like staggering layers of spiritual prerequisites. Like a person isn't just looking for a spouse, they're also looking for someone who's perfectly aligned in every single detail. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it's very important that you're aligned on the big details. Those are very important and very essential. But there are other details like, yeah, they play drums on the worship team. I want a guitar player, right? Unrealistic details. Or do you read the right authors? It's like, oh, you read John Piper? I don't know. Uh, as long as they like John Calvin, I guess I'll date them. Their matches, they don't have the exact view on eschatology, for example. Let's say, well, you're pre-trib and I'm post-trib. Oh, okay. You might think that's a critically important aspect. It turns it almost turns us into spiritual resumes. We're removing the things that weren't there to begin with, and we're adding expectations because we filtered our spiritual prerequisites the same way that we filter our apps. There's this other thing. I think I call it purity culture. It's sort of like this disillusionment, not disillusionment, but there's this kind of like lostness and disconnect between a lot of young people. And this is what I mean by that. I mean, for decades, there was a significant portion of the church that promoted very like strict courtship models, which are fine, like the I kissed dating goodbye era, right? And that movement effectively demonized casual, kind of low stakes, like getting to know someone. So, like the simple act of getting a coffee. It's like, well, you're not just getting a coffee to get to know someone, just like hang out with them. It's like you're either marrying them or not. And suddenly, going on a date had a lot more high stakes in these very sort of strict courtship models of dating. And when that movement, I guess the courtship movement, I wouldn't say it's gone for sure, but I think it's not as culturally trending as it was within the church. And it sort of fell out of favor. It left a vacuum when it disappeared. And today there's no widely, I mean, maybe there is in your church, but there's no just kind of like broad script for how you're supposed to date as a Christian. There's lots of books, really great books. But that's the problem. There's lots of books. There's lots of perspectives. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of coaches. There's lots of mentors. There's lots of sermon series on how to date. And it can be very confusing. It can be very disorienting as a young single who's kind of standing there in the middle ground, trying to navigate. On the left hand, they're trying to navigate a secular dating landscape that expects immediate physical intimacy. And you're not just trying to navigate that, but you're trying to avoid it. You're trying to resist it. You're trying to turn away from all of the signage and from all of the from all the advertisements and from all the movies, and you're trying to turn away from all of these things, but at the same time, you're trying to hold on to your Christian morals and values and ethics. And you're trying to figure out, how can I navigate this world when I feel torn between these two things? And sometimes you feel disillusioned, like you want this, you need a framework to help actually navigate dating in the modern world. The third thing would be this idea of the one, like there is like a soulmate, and it's okay if you have that belief. I'm gonna say that. Um, but I think that it can become a crushing weight. Much of modern church has inadvertently created an idol. Not every modern church, But a lot of modern churches have inadvertently created an idol out of marriage, treating it as the ultimate finish line of spiritual adulthood. Like there's milestones, and it's just the next milestone that you have to achieve. And once you achieve that milestone, then you're a real adult. Because the Protestant tradition largely lost the historical biblical category for the vocational beauty of singleness. Singles often feel treated like a problem to be solved or a demographic to be kept in a waiting room. When marriage is elevated to this level of, right, it's the biggest milestone, it's the next rung on a ladder. It's combined with this romanticized extra biblical myth of the soulmate. The stakes for a first date become high because people aren't just no, they're not just getting tacos to see if they enjoy each other's company. They're sitting across the table silently asking, is this the person that God has predestined for me since the foundation of the world to fulfill my ultimate purpose in life? Okay, and I'm being hyperbolic for a reason. I do believe in predestination, but I'm being hyperbolic for a reason. See, it puts a lot of pressure that can sometimes paralyze people, leading to over spiritualizing feelings or fleeing at the first sign of friction. And we don't spend enough time empowering singles in their singleness. And I'm gonna get back to that in a second. The fourth thing is the privatization of dating. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about in the first point, where I was talking about the commodification of it. Historically, courtship and dating happened in like this thick web of community. You met someone through your family, you met someone through your friends, or you met someone like at your local church, right? And the relationship was observed and supported by a multi-generational network. I mean, think about that. If it was like if it's like someone you met through your family, it's like a friend of a cousin, or it's like someone you met through your friends, well, there's people that already know that person that you're building this relationship with. And so as you're pursuing this relationship together, it's like there's more than just you two involved. It's the people behind them that are connected to each other who are involved in the supporting of this relationship. And it's multi-generational. I mean, there's your parents, maybe it's your aunts or uncles, or maybe it's older people in the church. Today, dating is, I wouldn't say entirely privatized, but it's become a lot more privatized. People are trying to evaluate a lifelong commitment in a vacuum. They feel that it's completely disconnected from the community that dating once lived in. It's disconnected from the community that would help them discern character in places that they might not otherwise see it if they're just isolated in their own little bubble. When dating is isolated from a grounded community, it becomes highly anxious and entirely dependent on emotions or on misinterpretations of each other. The fifth thing I want to talk about is the expectations, or the demographic, I should say, the demographic and expectations. There's a practical reality in many churches today that there's often a higher ratio of men or higher ratio of women, as we just looked. Currently, there is a higher ratio of men who are attending churches. And coupled with this are often clashing expectations about what spiritual leadership can actually look like in a modern context. And I think this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the culture that we're currently living in, that we currently live in a culture of tension, of ideological tension, of lots of loud noise, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of voices, all sharing their perspectives and their opinions. And again, some of them are really great, some of them aren't. Some of them are really good perspectives. But there's hundreds of these voices trying to desperately grab your attention and trying to tell you how you should think and live in the world and structure your morality and structure your ideology. There's tension because with so many voices speaking, it can be nauseating. It can be like a whirlwind. Like we're left confused instead of feeling like we have a trajectory, instead of feeling like we have an aim, instead of feeling like we have a very clear and laid out path before us. In the midst of a thousand different voices, we just feel confused and nauseated. And this can lead to tension in very critical and important fundamental ways. Young people are confused between, for example, traditional complementarianism or egalitarianism, and it leaves people confused because there's so many people vying for their attention on the subject that are not really sure which direction they're supposed to go, or how they're supposed to act, or what roles they're supposed to play. I think that I think that culture does a disser or I think sorry, I think that culture does a disservice in the way that it breaks apart the structured traditions that some people might come from. Perhaps there's young people who grew up in a certain church environment that, albeit maybe that church tradition is wrong about a few things, but I've always said that tradition's important for a reason. And one of those reasons is that it provides a structure. And it provides a structure so that I can go out and explore new ideas, knowing that if I get lost in a rabbit hole on some new idea, I have a tradition I have a structured tradition to fall back on. That there's that the rug's not going to be taken out from underneath my feet, so to speak. And the beautiful thing about that is it allows you to go out and look at the world in a different way, and to challenge the ideas that you grew up with in this tradition, this structured tradition that you grew up with. And it allows you to evaluate the beliefs that you have. And maybe you end up changing some of those beliefs. See, belonging to a tradition, belonging to a structured tradition of beliefs doesn't mean that I'm saying, okay, every single one of these beliefs within within this traditional system of doctrines, every single belief is correct. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the structure itself, the framework itself, is vitally important. And we live in a culture. Our current cultural division and tension and anxiety and stress has ripped apart a lot a lot of those traditional structures. It's ripped them apart and torn them to shreds. And a lot of that's a product of the deconstruction movement. When you just deconstruct and deconstruct and deconstruct and deconstruct, well, you're not really left with much if you don't start reconstructing fast. And without a structure there of some sort of traditional structure, a lot of young people are confused. A lot of young people are afraid. A lot of young people aren't sure what direction to go in. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit more on um, was when I was talking about. Hold on, just one second. I gotta find it again. Uh, where was it? Okay, the vocational beauty of singleness. So this is the other thing, and this is the thing I think that young adult ministries, at least in the majority of churches I've been in, get very wrong. When I when I was 32, um, long story short, I turned 32, and that was a moment in my life, like right after turning 32, I had come to a moment where I was finally genuinely soul searchingly accepting that I was okay with being single for the rest of my life. And it took me until I was 32 to accept that. All throughout my 20s and those first few years in my 30s, I was just terrified that I would never find a spouse and that I would be single for the rest of my life. I was terrified of it. When I finally accepted it, there was like this click, this shift that happened in my mind. And it was almost like you're wearing like thick sunglasses with multiple layers of polarization, and you're standing in front of a sunset, and it just looks so dim, pale. There's no color. But when you take off your glasses and you take off those sunglasses and you see the sunset, it is almost like, wow, I cannot believe that I've been standing here this whole time not seeing how beautiful this sunset really is. And I am so glad I took my sunglasses off for the first time. That's what it felt like when I had that moment in my life. For the first time in my life, I saw how beautiful singleness and empowering it could really be. Now, my story took a very quick turn. Very quickly, it turned, and I actually ended up meeting someone, dated, got married. Um, uh, but the part about that journey, I think that really stuck with me was just how eye-opening it was when I realized how powerful and beautiful singleness is. And I realized something else. And I realized that when you're a part of a church, ministry, whatever it is, there's there's a lot of focus on dating. There's a lot of focus on courtship and dating and what it's like traversing life as a young 20 something. Well, there's a lot of things I could say about that. And one of the things I would say is I think it's a very big disservice that church young adult ministry spends so much time on focused on dating. Maybe there's like one message on singleness. Like there's an entire sermon series. You go to any church, there's a big chance at that church once a year, there's a big sermon series on dating. And there's one message on singleness. One. And there's dozens of men sitting in this room, young women sitting in this room, and there's 5, 6, 7 messages about dating, but one about singleness. And they feel, wow, okay, well, I guess I'm out of the loop, right? I'm not dating, I'm single. And there's only one message about singleness. And the message about singleness is always the same message. Singleness is a gift. Believe me, I was single for a long time. Singleness is a gift. It is a valuable gift. And for some reason, that's what every single singleness message in a young adults ministry sounds like. Every single one that I've heard. Okay, but why don't we spend a week on that instead? Why don't we talk about really understanding what Paul means when he talks about singleness and how it is a gift? Like when we say that, what do we mean by that? And I think that we've created this culture where there is just this anxious expectation that as soon as you enter into a young adults ministry, you need to be like on the rink skating towards your goal of getting married. Like as soon as you enter into it, it's like this river, this rapidly flowing river, and you immediately have to start playing the game of dating until you eventually find a spouse and can breathe a big sigh of relief, and then leave everyone that you've made relationships with, and then go to a young marrieds ministry where there's maybe some people you know and some people you don't know. Don't get me started on why I hate that, but I think that it's a disservice because I think, and I did make a video about singleness on the channel, but I think singleness can change the world, especially among young Christians. If young Christian people realized how incredibly beautiful singleness was, I think that they could change the world. But I think that we put a lot of pressure as a church on dating because we're more focused on what we believe is fighting the culture. Because we look at the culture and we say, okay, well, the culture is just like, whatever, go on a date, have sex, whatever, like move in together, right? Who cares? You know, and the church looks at that and they're just like, okay, well, we need to do something because everything is sexualized, literally everything. I mean, you can watch a commercial about a burger and somehow a burger is sexualized. Like everything, just everything. Go to the gym, go to the beach, go to the mall, go to wherever. There's bound to be temptation. There's bound to be over sexualization everywhere in the culture because the culture is obsessed with sex. Just all culture talks about. And so the church is like, okay, well, we need to be teaching them, about saving themselves from marriage, and we need to talk about like healthy dating because like we want them to be dating because if they're dating and moving towards marriage, then they're not going to make these mistakes, getting addicted to porn or something like that. I get that. Like I get that ideology that like the church is thinking about like how to combat the culture, but I think that a better theology of singleness will do a better job of fighting the culture than spending all your time talking about dating. I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about dating. That is exactly what I'm not saying. But what I'm saying is that we need to spend more time talking about a good theology of singleness. Because I don't I don't regret my 20s. I mean, there's a lot of things I regret in my 20s, I should say, actually. But I know that God used them for a reason, God brought me through them for a reason. Absolutely. But if I did have a regret, one of mine would be not not leveraging my singleness for what I could have done with it, because I was so focused on finding a spouse. Because friend after friend after friend find a spouse, find a spouse, find a spouse, and as soon as they find a spouse, it almost feels like they're just slowly drifting away. It's almost like you just feel like you're losing all your friends. And then you get to a certain age, you get 30, hit 30 years old, and you feel like, okay, well, I've already lost all my friends from my 20s. And so you start making new ones. And then you hit 32 and you start losing those ones too. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm going through it again. It can feel very isolating. You can feel very alone. And the way that a lot of ministries, young adult ministries, are structured is it is that it does precisely that. It makes young singles feel alone. It makes them feel like a lobster, out of place, I should say, confused, like they're missing something. Like until they have a spouse, then they don't have a complete Christian life. And if you're single into your late 20s and early 30s, it's a little worse because not only do you feel disenfranchised, but now you feel awkward for just being at the young adults ministry. Now you're sitting there thinking like, okay, well, there's this young adults ministry that was like obsessed with everyone getting married. I didn't get married. And so where am I supposed to go? Because you're supposed to get married and go to the young marrieds and then have babies and you go to the young marrieds with babies. Like, where am I supposed to go? And there's millions of Christians who are in their late 20s, early 30s, who aren't dating, who are single, who feel alone, who feel disenfranchised because church has made life into these different ministries that are supposed to represent each part of your life. For some reason, it's like, oh, well, you're a kid, you go to the teenage youth group, and then you graduate from youth group, you go to young marrieds. That's where you're supposed to find a spouse, get married, go to singles, sorry, go to singles, and then you get married, then you go to young marrieds, and then you have a kid, then you go to young marrieds with kids, and then your kids get older, and then you go young married with like little older kids, and then you're not so young anymore, so then you're just married with kids, and then you go to like the married with like empty nesters ministry, and then you get really old and you're just like married, like, and then you're just like the silver saints ministry, like we're just really old and retired. And it's all these ministries in like these churches that you have, just like ministry after ministry after ministry after ministry. And I get the idea, like the idea is like, oh, we want to speak into the specific place that these people are in. I get that, but I don't agree that we need to orient the entire ministry around that. I think the most important thing that we you should there's two things that I think every church in America should orient their young adults ministry around. One, empowering a good theology of singleness, and two, encouraging them to form relationships with um, older generations in the church. That they should form relationships with older people and form generations with people in the church across all generations, across all ages. If you have two services, your young adults should be serving in one and attending the other. If you only have one service, your young adults should be serving in other ministries at different parts of the week. They should be actively pursuing mentorship, looking for older men to mentor them, older women to mentor them. And the first one, an empowering theology of singleness, one of the ways that looks is an empowering theology of evangelism. I think young people, especially, I mean, every Christian is called to the Great Commission, but I think young single Christians have a beautiful opportunity to leverage their singleness for evangelism. And I think that's what a good that's a part of what a healthy theology of singleness looks like. Those two things I think every young adults church ministry needs. And if there was a church ministry that had that, that established that as a healthy part of the fabric of their church, and then I think that we would start seeing young Christians not feel so disenfranchised, not feel so left behind, not feel so anxious about not having gotten married in their early 20s or mid 20s. and so many people not feeling like they're failing because they didn't, not feeling like they're lagging behind because they didn't hit a milestone. Because guess what? Living out your singleness as an empowered, you know, late 20s, early 30s, something individual, that's a milestone too. Like marriage as a milestone. What do we mean by milestone? Milestone of what? Marriage is something that you choose. I haven't met someone, we dated. I thought, yeah, I think I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. Yeah, it's a big decision. I'm not saying that it's not. Obviously, I got married. I know I'm very aware of how much of a big decision it is. But living out singleness, like the spiritual calling of singleness, is a big responsibility. They're both big responsibilities. And we don't talk enough about how important the responsibility of singleness is for the church community. So our church is failing young singles? Honestly, yes. Not every church. I'm not going to make emphatic statements. You know that, you know me. I don't make universals because I haven't been to every single church in America. I don't think it's physically possible for me to do that. But from my subjective observations, yes, I think most churches are failing young singles right now. And I think right now is the best time for churches to wake up. Right now, I think it's the best time for churches to reevaluate their young adults ministry and to reorient the way that they do young adults ministry, because a lot of young adults are coming to church now. You got a lot of millennials, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of Gen Xers, or sorry, a lot of Gen Alphas coming to church. Young people looking for answers. Why are they coming to church? They're looking for answers. They're looking for something. A lot of young men who feel disenfranchised because maybe they feel like they've wandered through so many confusing ideologies, so many confusing perspectives on how they should see the world, and they're told, maybe they've been told that they don't matter, maybe they've been told that they have no place, maybe they've been told that they're insignificant, but yet everything in them tells them otherwise, that they do have a purpose, and they want to be, they want to be like David. They want to be like these mighty men that they read about in the Old Testament, and they're trying to figure out how can I get there? I'm not saying that's why men are flocking to church more than women. I don't know. There should be more study and data to find out why the percentages have completely flipped. I don't know. But I think that now is the time for churches to reevaluate. So that's my perspective. I would love to hear your perspective. I would love to hear your thoughts. Why do you think that the percentages of men and women who are actively going to church has completely flipped since COVID? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Why do you think that's the case? I'd also love to hear your thoughts on, do you think that churches are failing young singles? I mean, maybe you do, and maybe there's some perspective that I haven't thought of before. I would love to hear that. I'd love to hear what you think about that. Leave a comment down below. As always, leave a like if you like the video, if you like the conversation, and don't forget to subscribe, because that definitely does help. It definitely helps me, because it helps me know that that these videos are worth it. So thanks for joining me tonight. It's been so awesome to be here with you all, and I pray that you have an incredible and wonderful weekend. I love you all. Bye.